Good morning, welcome students. So in this video lecture we'll be continuing with the types of sampling. So in the previous lectures we have seen what is probability sampling and what is non-probability sampling, and we have discussed the simple random sampling and systematic random sampling we have discussed in the previous lectures. Now we'll be discussing stratified random sampling. So in a stratified random sampling, it is a type of probability method that is superior to that of the random sampling because it reduces the sampling error. And it this type of method is followed when a population is not homogeneous. That means if a population is heterogeneous, then we use this stratified sampling. In this method, first we divide the population into different subgroups known as strata, such that the items in each stratum are homogeneous. So we'll be just dividing the individuals in a group into different strata, and then we will be using the sampling method. And from each strata, the items will be selected by the simple random method. So a stratum will be the subset of a population that shares at least one common characteristic, such as males and females. So identify the relevant strata and their actual representation in the population. And the random sampling is then used to select a sufficient number of subjects from each stratum. And after that, the stratified sampling is often used when one or more of the stratum in a population have a low incidence relative to the other strata. So in stratified sampling, the heterogeneous population is divided into several more or less homogeneous sections or groups, which is called as a strata, and a sample is drawn from each strata by simple random sampling. It gives more representative sample and accuracy. For example, the selection of fishes from different strata like male, female, followed by the different maturity stages. So these are the some example. So there will be a large population. So according to stratified sampling, the population, just consider this as a large population, and in that population there will be small strata, and this strata we will be dividing this population into different strata, and this strata is called as a subset, and this strata will be either possessing the same characteristics, such as it may be a female group in the population. This strata will be the male population. Okay, this again a female population. So this again a female population. Then this may be a male population. This may be a female population, so on. So based upon the sex, the subsets are divided into certain strata or different group or different subset. Okay, and from these subset we will be just choosing the representatives randomly. So that is called as a stratified sampling. Hope that is clear for you. So again, next type of classification, or the next type of sampling, it is a stratified random sampling. So, stratified random sampling is also similar to that of we simply call it as a stratified sampling. The population is divided into two or more groups called as a strata according to some criteria, such as the geographical level or the grade level or the income level. We are just dividing the main population into the certain subgroups, and the different steps involved is that the population is divided into groups called as a strata. Then every unit in a stratum has a chance of being selected. That means we are just randomly choosing the individuals or choosing the group randomly. So the first step, it is division of the individuals in a population into different strata based upon the certain criteria, and then we are just choosing the individuals from the each stratum, and this choosing, it's purely random, or we can say that it is purely the chance of being selected. And using the same sampling fraction of all strata ensures a proportionate representation in the sample. So the chance of choosing an individual from a strata, it is merely a chance, and we just rely on the fact that each individuals in a stratum are having the same chance of being getting selected. We are just imagining like that, and the adequate representation of minority subgroup of the interest can be ensured by the stratification and varying the sampling fraction between the strata as required. So if you are just dividing the population into small numerous subgroups, then the chance of being selection of each individual is more if you are just increasing the subgroups. So this is a major population from that. This is the first strata, that is a women, and this is a second strata, and from that I'm just randomly selecting the few individuals. For example, this one, I'm just choosing the individuals. And the first sampling frame of the entire population is separated for each stratum. So I'm just dividing the individuals, the women, into one strata and the men into another strata. Then again, if I want to divide the women's in this from this strata, I can just form the subgroups like working women and non-working women, and accordingly the men also I can just divide. Then based upon the age group also I can divide. So these are the different criteria based upon the different individuals are classified. That classification is called as a strata. So the next type, it is a cluster sampling. The cluster sampling is a probability sample in which each sampling unit is a collection of elements. And it is effective, and this cluster sampling is a method in which a population is divided into some recognizable subunits called as clusters, and now a random sample is drawn from all the units belonging to the selected cluster, which constitutes a sample. And the cluster sampling is used in many surveys as it is very convenient and less costly. So it is very effective under the following circumstances, such as a good sampling frame is not available or costly, while the frame listing the clusters is easily obtained, and the cost of obtaining the observation increases as a distance separating the elements increases. For example, the clusters such as the city blocks based upon the political or the geographical units, based upon the housing units, based upon the college students, hospitals, based upon the illness, then automobile, that is a set of 4 tires. So these are the clusters. City block, there may be the different cities. For example, you can say that the Kochi city, it is one of the city. Then Thrissur city you can take, Alapura city you can take, Kottayam. Likewise, these are the city blocks, and from that city blocks you can choose any political or the geographical area. Then the housing units, you might have noticed with there are the different residential associations are there, and from that you can choose the college students. Then there are the hospitals, different hospitals are there, and these hospitals are considered as the clusters, and from that you can choose a different type of illness. So those are the samples that you are taking. And there is the automobile, that is a cluster, and there are the set of 4 tires. type of automobiles, you are just taking only the 4 tires automobiles. So these are the examples for the cluster. So once again, the cluster, uh, it is a cluster, it is some recognizable subunits. So it is some recognizable subunits of a main population. So here is a pictorial representation of a cluster sampling. So this is a population here. That population is divided into 3 clusters. That is a cluster 1, cluster 2, and cluster 3. And the randomly sampled within each cluster. We are just taking one sample from this, one sample from the cluster 2, and the one sample from the cluster 3. So we got the 3 sampling units. And this is again a pictorial representation. So this is a population, that is a section 1, section 2, 3, 4, and 5. And in that, I'm just choosing the few houses. So those are the representatives of this big population. So this is a type of cluster sampling. So I'm just taking only a group. I'm not choosing an individual house from this group. I'm just taking a group of houses called as a cluster from a single unit. Okay, as a representative. That's called as a cluster sampling. Then the next type, it is a convenient type of sampling. In this convenient type of sampling, it is an exploratory research where the researcher, it is a type of exploratory research where the researcher is interested in getting an inexpensive approximation. The sample is selected because they are convenient. So there is uh, no criteria based upon which we are just choosing the sample. Only the investigator just take the sample which is convenient for him or her, and the sample is selected because they are convenient, and it is a non-probability type of method sampling, and often used during the preliminary research efforts to get an estimate without incurring the cost of the time required to select the random sampling. Any type of non-probability sampling which involves a sample being drawn from that part of a population which is close to hand. So that is readily available and convenient. For example, if you are just taking the sample of water from a pond, it is very difficult to take a sample of water from the center of the pond, isn't it? For that, you need uh, a vessel, or you need a small boat, or any small vessel to reach the center of the pond to take water from the center. So for your convenience, you will be taking the water from near to the shore area. So that's based upon the convenience. So that type of convenience sampling is called as a convenience sampling. Then that is a readily availability of the sample, and the researcher using such a sample cannot scientifically make generalization about the total population, isn't it? And from this sample, because it would not be representative enough, and if you are taking the sample of water from the shore area, that may contain the more impurities, because it is in constant association with the land area. So it may be of more polluted water than which you might get from the interior or the center of the pond. So it cannot be, the result that we are getting will not be as can be as scientifically proven, or we cannot say that it is correct. For example, if the another example is that if the interviewer was to conduct a survey at a shopping center early in the morning on the given day, the people that he or she could interview would be limited to those given there at that given time, which would not represent the views of the other members of the society. Okay, So that's an another